Assalamualaikum. Okay, we meet again, this time with the topic of variance analysis, and we are going to focus on material variance and also labor variance. I am Dr. Lizz from UiTM Terengganu in beautiful Malaysia, and then I will also use the slides that I obtained from the internet by the authors of Susan Kumel, Charles Caldwell, and it all. Okay, so we are going to look at material variance analysis now. If you recall, in the last video, we have looked at the managing cost through the use of what we call the standard costing. Okay, so companies use standard costing so that they can manage the cost well, so that they can have the target cost, which is the standard cost. Okay, the target cost is actually the standard cost. As you can still remember, the direct material, direct labor, variable overhead, and fixed overhead. And then that has become the benchmark that the company has when they actually operate and they look at their actual cost at the end of the period. So when they compare the standard cost and the actual cost, so they are going to make a comparison of whether the standard and the actual are the same or not. Okay, so of course you can expect that standard and actual will not be the same in some cases, but in some cases they might be the same. So when there is a difference, then that is what we call cost variance. It means the difference between the standard cost and the actual cost. So you might wonder what has caused the difference or the variance. Okay, so when we look further, you are going to see that the difference is, the analysis of the difference is what we call the variance analysis. Okay, so when you do the analysis, then you will discover that the variance could be due to two different reasons. Number one is due to the quantity variance, and number two is what we call the price variance. Okay, so this is what will create the difference or the variance in cost. Okay, so we look at quantity variance. Then what is quantity variance? If you look here, quantity variance is actually the difference between actual quantity and the standard quantity. Actual quantity is the actual amount of input or direct materials that you use to produce the product, one unit of product. And standard quantity is what you have already written down in your standard cost card. How much should you use to produce one unit of product? That is the standard. So when the actual quantity that you use and the standard quantity that you use are not the same, then they will give rise to the quantity variance. Okay, and then we look at what gives rise to the price variance. Okay, so it is because of the difference between the actual price and the standard price. Okay, the difference between actual price and the standard price, that is the actual price that you have to pay for one unit of material, or the actual price that you have to pay for your labor, as compared to the standard price, which is the standard price that you have already set in your target standard cost card. So when there is a difference between these two, then we are going to have what we call the price variance. So now, why do we need to look at these quantity and price difference separately? Okay, so basically there are two reasons here. Number one is because of the responsibility of different people. Okay, so when you talk about purchasing manager, they are responsible when you purchase raw materials. Okay, so of course they are responsible for the prices that you have to pay for the material that you have to buy. On the other hand, when it comes to the quantity, then you are talking about the responsibility of the production manager. So we have two different parties here, the purchasing manager and the production manager. Then who will be at fault when there is a variance to the material variance? Okay, and then the buying and using of activities also occur at different times. Raw material may be purchased now and then held in inventory, and then after certain period of time, then only it will be used in the production. So when you purchase the raw material, it will be the responsibility of the purchasing manager, but then when you use the material, it will be in the responsibility of the production manager. So when you want to investigate why is there material variance, then we have to look at these two, quantity variance and price variance, and then so we know whose fault is it. Is it the purchasing manager or is it the production manager's responsibility? Okay, so now you know what drive the difference in or the variance in cost. The first one is what we have looked at now, due to the difference in quantity used and quantity targeted. Okay, and number two is because of the difference in price. Okay, so that is what will give you the cost variance. Okay, so because of we have direct material cost, we have direct labor cost, we have variable overhead cost, and we have fixed overhead cost to produce 1 unit of product, then we are going to study the difference in variance in material cost and also in direct labor cost. And then after that, in our next video, we are going to focus on the variable overhead. Okay, so today we are going to look at direct material variance and also direct labor variance. So first of all, we are going to look at direct material variance. Okay, we are going to use this question on your left to see how do we calculate the direct material variance. So as you can see from this example, we have come up with the standard cost card, because when you want to prepare the variance analysis, then the first thing that you have to prepare is the standard cost card. So that is why in most of the questions to calculate the variance analysis, the question will ask first for you to prepare the standard cost card. So this is the standard cost card as prepared as asked in this question. A. Prepare a standard cost card for 1 unit of plastic dustpan. So this company actually produced the plastic dustpan that require this material. So as you can see in this question, 1 or 2 plastic produce plastic product, and its main and highest demanded product is the plastic dustpan. So this is the estimated cost information related to 1 unit of dustpan. And then in our previous video, we have already illustrated how you can come up with the standard cost card. Okay, so based on this cost card, based on this question, then we will get this cost card. Okay, so here as we can see, to produce 1 unit of plastic dustpan, it will require some direct material like this. These are the costs incurred, the standard cost card. That is the standard cost to produce 1 unit of plastic dustpan. So it will require direct material, which consists of 2 types, wood and plastic. Wood 1 unit at 1 ringgit each, that will cost you 1 ringgit per unit of plastic dustpan. Plastic 0.1 kilogram at 10 ringgit per kilogram, that will give you 1 ringgit per unit. Direct labor hours 0.2 hours at the rate of 6 ringgit per hour, so that will give you 1.2. And then variable overhead 0.2 hours at 3 ringgit per hour, that will give you 60 cent per unit. And fixed overhead 1 unit at 1 ringgit and 20 cent per unit, that will give you 1 ringgit and 20 cent per unit. So standard cost per unit will be 5 ringgit. So remember, build the standard cost card first before you start calculating the variance. So in this question, as you can see, the question asks you to calculate the material price variance and direct material usage of the wood handle. So we focus first on the wood handle. Okay, now let's see. Refer to our standard cost card because this is a very important information that you need to look at constantly. So first of all, if we want to determine the material price variance, this is the formula that you have to use. Okay, we are talking about material price here. So we are going to look at the difference in the standard price and the actual price. So that's why we call it price variance. That is the difference in the price of the standard and actual price, and you times it with the actual quantity purchased because we are talking about price. So we are talking about units purchased. Okay, so if you look at the question, look back at your standard cost card, then you will discover that the standard price of the wood handle is 1 ringgit. This is the standard price because whatever listed in the standard cost card here are actually the standard cost. Okay, standard cost per unit, standard quantity per unit here, and this is the standard cost for 1 unit of the product. Okay, so the standard price of the wood here is 1 ringgit from your standard cost card. So you are going to write here the standard price is 1 ringgit. And then after that, we have to find the actual price. This is our actual price. So where are you going to get this information? Okay, to get the actual price, we go back to our question here. The actual results for the month of November are as follows. So these are the actual results given to you in this table. Okay, direct material use is 8,000 units of handles at 1 ringgit and 20 cent. So here, this is the actual price that you are looking for. Okay, so we are going to have the actual price now is 1 ringgit and 20 cent, and then times it with the actual quantity. So again, for actual quantity, as you can see here, 8,000 units of wood handles have been purchased. So this is the actual units. So we are going to write here times it with 8,000 units. Okay, so once you have settled this calculation, you are going to get the answer here, which is 1,600. Okay, so you will get 1,600, but then as you can see here, the standard price is only 1 ringgit, but the actual price is actually 1 ringgit and 20 cent, which is higher than the standard price. So you are paying something higher than the standard. So because of that, now we can say that your variance now is unfavorable, or you can call it adverse. Okay, so that is how we calculate the material price variance. That is, you look at the difference between the standard price and the actual price. Now we want to look at another type of variance here, which is material usage variance. Some book refers to it as the material quantity variance. Okay, so material usage variance, it deals with standard quantity and actual quantity. Okay, so standard quantity compare with our actual quantity times it with the standard price of the material. We are still talking about the wood handles here. So let's talk about standard quantity here. Okay. Please bear in mind that standard quantity that we mean here is actually the standard quantity of actual product. Okay, so this is standard quantity of actual production. Okay, so actual production. So what do we mean by that? It means that the formula will be standard quantity. You will need to calculate it first. It will be standard quantity as shown in your standard cost card, which is 1 unit. So for every 1 unit of plastic dustpan, you will need 1 unit of wood handle. So standard quantity is actually 1. Okay, of actual units produced or actual production. So how much is your actual production? Then you are going to look at the result of actual results for the month of November. So as you can see here that 8,000 units of plastic dustpan were produced. So this is the actual units produced. So this is what we want to use here, which is 8,000 units. So 8,000, you write down there, okay, and then our actual quantity. Actual quantity here means actual quantity that you have used. Okay, so here it says that 8,000 units have been purchased and also have been used. Okay, so you just minus it with 8,000 here, times it with the standard price. As you can see, remember our standard price just now is 1 ringgit and 1 ringgit. So you time it 1 ringgit. So over here we are going to get 8,000 of standard quantity. Actual quantity used is also 8,000. So we have 0 here times 1. Then we have 0. Okay, so what does it mean 0? It means that standard, according to the standard, you are supposed to use 8,000 wood handles, and then it turns out that you actually use 8,000 handles. Okay, times with the standard price of 1 ringgit, so you get 0. And because of this, we can say that there is no difference between standard cost and actual standard quantity and actual quantity, and because of that, there is no adverse or favorable variance. Okay, so those are the direct material variance. So we are going to move to direct labor variance. So for direct labor variance, same like direct material variance, we also have two types of variance here, okay, which is labor rate variance, which is similar to the material price variance. Just now we are talking about the price, but in terms of labor, you don't call it price, but you call it rates, which is the rate that you pay for your labor. Okay, and then we have labor efficiency variance here, which is also the same as the material usage variance. Okay, for material we say usage or quantity because we are talking about the material, the quantity of material that you use. Okay, but for labor we call them efficiency variance. That is, we want to look at how efficient is our labor as compared to the standard. Okay, so we go to labor rate variance first. So as you can see, labor rate variance is standard rate minus with actual rate times it with actual hours. So this is like the material price formula, standard price minus actual price times with actual quantity. You just replace the price with the rate here and the quantity with the hours. Okay, so we have standard rate minus actual rate times it with actual hours. So we are talking about, is there a difference between the amount that we actually pay our labor with the standard rate? Okay, so let's try to answer this question. So just like material variance, we refer to our standard cost card for you to do your calculation of variance. So look at the standard direct labor. Okay, so for direct labor, whatever appear here is actually your standard cost and standard rate and standard hours for 1 unit. So standard rate that we have here is 6 ringgit. So you just take the 6 ringgit there minus with actual rate. How do we find the actual rate? Okay, we go back to our data here. So this is the actual results just now. So as you can see, we have 2,400 hours who work at 6 ringgit and 20 cent per hour. So this is your actual rate. Okay, so this rate you are going to write it here, 6 ringgit and 20 cent, and then times it with the actual hours. Your actual hours is already given to you here, which is 2,400. So times it with 2,400. 2,400. So we are going to have here, the answer is 480. Okay, so you get the answer of 480. And then we are going to see whether it is favorable or adverse. Okay, the standard rate is 6 ringgit, but the actual rate is 6 ringgit and 20 cent. So it means that you are paying your labor at a slightly higher rate than the standard rate. Okay, so that makes 480 here is an adverse variance. Okay, because you are paying more than what the standard usually is. That is labor rate variance. Okay, so we look at labor efficiency variance. For labor efficiency variance, we are actually talking about something similar to material usage variance. We are comparing standard quantity with standard hours, actual quantity, actual hours, and standard price, we put it standard rate. Okay, so here we are going to see that for labor efficiency variance, we need to calculate the standard hours. Just like the material usage variance, standard hours here is actually the standard hours of actual production. Just like the material usage variance. Okay, so how do we calculate the standard hours? You just take here, you go back to your standard cost card, then you are going to see that here we have 0.2 hours per unit of plastic dustpan that you need. So you just take 0.2 hours and then you times it with the actual production or actual units produced. In this case, we have already calculated the actual units produced just now to be 8,000. So you times it with 8,000 and then minus with actual hours, which is 2,400 that we have already seen used over there. And then you close the bracket and then we times it with the standard rate, which is 6 ringgit. Okay, so we are going to see here, we are going to get 4,800. So is this favorable or unfavorable? So when you compare 0.2 times 8,000, you are going to get 1,600. And then you compare it with your actual hours, 2,400. So you can see that for something to produce 8,000 units here, standard says you only need 1,600 hours. However, you have used 2,400 hours. So this is way too high. You are taking way too long to produce the same amount of units. Okay, so over here we say that 4,800 is actually the unfavorable or adverse. Okay, so that's it for direct labor variance and direct material variance. We have two here for material variance, price and usage, and also for direct labor variance we have rate and efficiency. So once you have understood about the calculation of direct material variance and also direct labor variance, so now we want to look at the theoretical part of it, who is responsible for the variance that has occurred. Okay, so responsibility for materials variance, as you can see, between the production manager and the purchasing manager. Okay, so there is an argument about who is responsible for the material variance. So as you can see, the standard price is used to compute the quantity variance so that the production manager is not held responsible for the purchasing manager's performance. So as you can see here, the production manager is saying that he is not responsible for the unfavorable materials quantity variance. Why? That is because of the purchasing manager here purchase cheap material, so that they have to use more of the material. Okay, but then the purchasing manager can say that the poor scheduling requires the purchasing manager to rush orders, and when you rush orders, it will be at higher prices, so causing unfavorable price variance. Okay, so the same thing goes with the labor variance. Now, who is responsible for the labor variance? Basically, it says that production managers are held accountable because they are the one who determine the mix of the skilled levels assigned to work tasks, level of employee motivation, the quality of production supervision, and the quality of training provided to employees. These are all under the responsibility of the production managers. Okay, however, the production managers can always say that I am not responsible for the unfavorable labor efficiency variance. Okay, why? Because you purchased cheap material, so it took more time to process. However, purchasing manager can counter back and say that it took more time to process because of the maintenance department. They do not poorly maintain your equipment, so it goes back to the production managers. Okay, so because of that, you can see that there is interaction among variances. Okay, so I am not responsible for the unfavorable labor variance here, and then you purchase cheap material, and then this is the maintenance people or the engineer, and then the other people may say that you use too much time to poorly train workers and poor supervision. So it's always goes back to who will blame who. But then when you detail out the variance, then we can see who we can blame, and then not just to blame actually, but we want to find the corrective action, and so that we can rectify the problem, turning the unfavorable variance into something positive. Okay, so with that, that's all for material and labor variance. We'll see you again in the next video on overhead variance. So stay tuned. Thank you so much.